What is your best instant karma story? Story 1. I was on safari in Kenya with my slightly psychotic family. It was the morning of departure, and we had to get from the safari lodge to the airstrip and then fly back to Nairobi. The plan was to have one safari jeep full of our luggage, which would go straight to the airport. The other safari jeep would take my family on one last excursion to see some animals before heading to the airstrip. I enter the safari jeep and I take the only available seat at the very back. Not a very good seat to spot animals from. Suddenly, my sister starts freaking the frick out and screaming at me for taking that seat. WTF. I had already had enough of her drama from all the previous days, so I just got out of the jeep and went to sit in the other jeep, which was going straight to the airstrip. We started driving and I was prepared to have to wait for my family at the airport in the blistering heat while they were out looking for animals. But then, about 10 minutes into the drive, I suddenly spot a herd of no less than 15 elephants. I asked the guide if we could get any closer. He literally drove right into the middle of the herd. I was surrounded by elephants of all ages. We were so close. It was truly an amazing sight. So the guide used his walkie-talkie to inform the other guide that he should bring the rest of the family here. We stayed there for a good 10 minutes as we watched the herd slowly walk from the field into the bushes. By the time my family arrived at the scene, it was too late. All the elephants had migrated into the bushes and were nowhere to be seen. And guess whose favorite animal is the elephant? My sister's. That just makes that story so much better knowing that her favorite animal is the elephant. But that's so cool though, pretty much getting your own private safari tour, especially after having to deal with your crazy family that whole time. Why on earth did your sister freak out about you sitting in the back though? Did she not want to have a good time spotting animals? Story 2. In middle school, I had to share a bus stop with this girl who lived down the street from me. She was a little turd who would treat her friends great and nearly everybody else like crud. But she never bugged me all that much. Sometimes we even talked while waiting for the bus. Like she had this streak of normality she only let show occasionally. Well, one day we were walking back from the bus stop and talking about our day, when she suddenly asked me to stop walking. I hesitated for a moment, but stopped anyway. She was on the opposite side of the street from me, and I thought she wanted to cross so we weren't yelling back and forth. We lived on a dirt road and it was spring, meaning you had to constantly avoid massive puddles collecting in potholes. I only had a few seconds to realize that she had just asked me to stop because there was a car coming down the street, about to splash me with the rancid mud that had collected in the fairly large puddle right next to me. I only had a second to throw up my arms and prepare for the worst. I got one look at her smug face and big stupid grin, right before the driver veered to the right and absolutely soaked her in mud and whatever god-awful mess was in the puddle right next to her. The sad part is I never got a glimpse at the driver. I was too focused on laughing my butt off as she swore and stomped up her driveway to the back door. We didn't talk much after that. I think she was too embarrassed. But that driver is a goddamn hero. What a little jerk trying to set you up like that. I wonder if the driver knew her and knew how she can be. Story 3. I was driving home with some friends and this idiot in the lane next to us kept making shady maneuvers. I would stop at a red light, the light would turn green, he would floor it and start weaving in and out of traffic, cutting people off, squeezing into openings he had no business squeezing into, and almost causing accidents. Then the next light would turn red, he'd slam on the brakes, and we'd end up waiting at the light next to him again. It must have happened at like 5 lights in a row. Finally, he finds an opening, punches it, and just speeds off into the distance, probably going double the speed limit. About a mile down the road, we see a cop on the side of the road with his lights on, and somebody pulled over. We were all like, oh, please let it be this freaking butthole. Sure enough, we drive by, see that it's him, and everyone just starts laughing. It was so satisfying, if anything. I've always been confused as to why people feel the need to get to the red light before everyone else. Just wasting gas. Plus, now I get to pull up in the lane next to you really slowly. Story 4. Got to work and immediately got asked to deal with a difficult customer who had ringed the store from a parking bay in our car park. Lady says she has the wrong frozen drink and wants a refund and a replacement. Literally $1. I take out the dollar and try to find out what drink she wants. She goes off because she also wanted a refund for the fries because the event has made her sick to her stomach because of bad customer service. I say that I didn't know she wanted a full refund as it wasn't mentioned on the phone, literally as I walked into the office. She keeps going on about how she's going to be late for the 4 minutes she spent in the park and rants for 5 more minutes about service before I tell her that I'm going to go get a refund and try to make sure she still gets to her event. She throws a bag of fries at me, hitting me in the chest, and I grab it and walk off to get a refund. Keep yelling until I get back with $2.60. Turns out the man behind her watched the whole thing, and because she was in a company car, he reported her to the company, Tupperware. She was fired that afternoon. The lady then tried to get me fired, saying I caused it. And to get compensation, our customer service team laughed at her and eventually my owner had to call her. When he called her, she started swearing at him and he told her, if you're gonna swear at me, I'm gonna tell Tupperware again, and hung up. Only time I think the abused staff member has actually had a big win in my job. The if you're gonna swear at me, I'm gonna call Tupperware line goes so unnecessarily hard though. But I can't stand customers like that. Like, is the $2.60 really worth treating other people like trash? Story 5. I have a friend with muscular dystrophy. Me and some other friends had gone to Mitsuwa, a really cool Japanese store. When we come out, a sports car was parked in the goddamn lines between the two handicap spots, meaning my friend couldn't even get in his van because that space is where the ramp needs to come out. We went into the store kinda thinking maybe they could just make an announcement, but customer service said to call the cops. So we waited for a while, and finally the young lady who done this dong move came out of the store and went to get in her car. We told her we called the cops and she kinda laughed. No, we really called the cops. Luckily the traffic cop pulled up right that moment. She made the girl move and we were able to go on our way and watch her receive I can only hope for a fairly hefty ticket as we went. Where I live, it's a $250 fine for parking in a handicapped space without a permit. I'd like to think that lady got a $500 fine for impeding 2 spaces. Oh my god, I see people in handicapped spots who obviously are not supposed to be there all the time where I'm from. It really irks me. Like, how are you that selfish? You really think you're that special that you need to take up a spot like that for yourself? Story 6. This happened just 2 days ago, and I deserved it. So my dad was working on a cabinet, so he was wearing reading glasses and a headlamp to be able to see the small parts as precisely as he could. I laughed and gave him a hard time about the combination before he went down to the basement. It was at this moment that the storm outside knocked the power out for about 4 hours, and I was struggling to get my bearings because of how dark it had become. It was around 9 p.m. My dad, on the other hand, was down in the basement with his headlamp on and laughed at me when he got upstairs, especially when I had to ask for his help finding the flashlight in my room. Never make fun of a dad and his headlamp drip. It'll come and bite you in the butt sooner than you'd expect. Story 7. I was sitting as a guest at dinner at a wedding reception. People were tapping their glasses to get the bride and groom to kiss. One guy at my table got really obnoxious with it and started banging on the glass vase centerpiece, loud and hard. He kept doing it over and over every couple minutes. Bong, 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 until finally it went bong, 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 ploop. Vase didn't shatter. Instead, he put a hole in it. A spoon-sized piece of glass broke away, and the vase, which was a good 20 inches tall and filled with water, began to empty as water poured out the hole like a spigot, directly into his wife's lap. I felt bad for her, but oh man, that was gratifying. Poor wife. What an absolute idiot though. Someone must have had too much fun at the bar during the reception. Story 8. I was in the passing lane on the highway, slowly coming up on a couple of cars in the right lane. The speed limit was about to decrease ahead and another car came up behind me going pretty fast. Instead of gassing it to get ahead of the traffic to my right, I slowed down and pulled in behind them, with the car behind me right on my butt. Once I got into the right lane, the car floored it and passed me honking the horn, and the passenger's body was half out the car window yelling at me and flipping me off as they passed. Turns out the car I pulled in behind was an unmarked state trooper who promptly pulled them over. Justice. God, me and my unbridled road rage absolutely loves reading stories like this where idiot drivers get instant karma. Story 9. As a teacher, I get to experience instant karma daily. One that sticks out in particular. I had a student when I was teaching at a middle school who was loud, obnoxious, and willing to do anything for attention. We had just finished an exam which required stapled papers in order to be turned in, and he kept hitting the stapler against his hand with it open. All I said was, "Hey, if you keep hitting that stapler against your hand with it open, it probably won't end well for you." He responded with, "I do this all the time. I've never been stabbed." Click. Student lets out the loudest scream I've ever heard. Bleeding, crying, I'm laughing, on the inside hopefully, and sent him out to the office. That is not funny, but that's so incredibly funny. Hope to God he learned to listen to you more after that. Story 10. Tried to get home to my parents for Christmas in a blizzard, and guy started tailgating me on the highway, flashing his lights the works. This goes on for a mile or until I slow to a crawl enough for him to get the hint to go around. He speeds off and about half a mile down the road, I see him facing the other way on the side of the road. Similar story. Was driving in a blizzard and a tandem semi-truck, UPS in fact, came zooming up behind me, so I got into the far right lane. I'm going about 25. This dude had to be going twice that. Shortly after passing me, the truck starts swerving, both trailers going in opposite directions. He ended up in the median. Luckily, no one was injured by his foolish driving. You'd think people driving in a blizzard would know not to speed, etc., but it seems the worse the weather is, the worse the drivers are. So glad no one got hurt in either of those stories. Story 11. A guy and some of his friends were crossing the street when the light said not to. This was on the day of the St. Patrick's Day parade in Chicago, so there was a lot of people downtown and everyone was drunk and crossing the street when they shouldn't be. When the car they were walking in front of honked at them, the guy got mad and started yelling at the driver, and the driver and him got into an argument of sorts where they traded some vulgar hand signs. At the end, the guy flips off the driver and then spits on his window. A few seconds later, we hear sirens and see lights flashing. The cops stop right in front of the guy and his friends and arrest him. Imagine thinking spitting on a car is a good idea, even when drunk. Especially during a holiday like St. Patrick's Day when the cops are definitely going to be out more. Story 12. I was coming home from school with a friend, early in my balance and didn't fall. My friend laughed out loud and fell down into the ice. This reminds me of a similar one I had. Was skating with a couple friends at night and hit a crack in the path that stopped my board, and I stumbled forward off of the board. My friend laughed his butt off. Not long afterwards, his wheel hits a crack which stops the board, but his dumb butt doesn't react in time, and just face plants and scratches up his chin. I hope you and your friends never let him live that down. It's the only right thing to do. Story 13. When I was a kid, about 9 or so, my dad and I were at the airport food court eating while waiting on our flight. My eyes were bigger than my stomach and didn't touch my fries. Rather than throw them away, I asked some lady if she wanted them. When we get to the main lobby for our flight, lo and behold, who do we see? Yep, that same lady. She was in the main kiosk as a fuggin', and she let us know she gave us a comp upgrade to business class. That was the first time I had ever flown business class. Nah, I'm about to go give fries to random ladies now and see what happens. Story 14. When I was in high school, there was always a bit of a bottleneck to get out of the student parking lot at the end of the day. Basically, you had to let people pull down the aisles as you came down the side so you could leave. I let the car go from the last aisle, and then this guy I knew, the weirdest, jerkiest kid in the school, who tried to give himself the worst, cringiest nicknames on multiple occasions, darted out in front of me, and then he and the idiots in this car started pointing and laughing at me. While he was looking back at me, he rear-ended the car in front of him. I really hope he got some good nicknames related to his little fender bender after that. Story 15. I got a virus on my PC, keystroke logger I assume, and some dumb butthole bought my eBay and PayPal login and password and went shopping. I call him a dumb butthole as he didn't bother taking 5 minutes to lock me out of the accounts. He just went shopping for TVs, cameras, iPads, you name it. I changed my passwords and locked him out, then wiped my PC. On my phone I got all the purchase receipt emails as he made each purchase, including his name and delivery address. Yeah, definitely deserve the dumb butthole name. How are you gonna buy someone's login info and not change a single thing? Story 16. My dad stopped paying my college tuition without telling me. I would have understood if he told me, which resulted in me going to school to register for classes and being told I couldn't. But I had already signed a semester lease for a condo, and ended up having to leave campus shortly after and go back home to work full-time until I got off on my own. Christmas, my dad gave me a $5 lottery ticket in my stocking, and I won $30,000. Dang, good for you! That's pretty scummy that your dad didn't even tell you first and screwed you over like that though. That $30K is well deserved. Story 17. I witnessed a road rage incident where a man got out of his car at a red light, went to the door of the driver of a minivan and yelled at the window for a minute. When the light turned green, he went back to his car but his door was locked. This is beautifully simple and I can just imagine the look on the man's face. Confusion, then realization, then rage, followed by shame. Glorious. Story 18. I was at a crosswalk in Brooklyn, looking left, then right, then left again. A guy in a suit pauses a yelling phone conversation to snicker at me, saying, "It's a one-way, bro." No sooner had he set foot in the intersection than he had a mild collision with a bicyclist going the wrong way. Neither was hurt enough to slow down as the cyclist rode off. The two competed to see who could say, "Watch where you're going" the loudest. It was a tie. Nah, Brooklyn. Story 19. I was commuting into Atlanta for a work matter. Dude in a nice car was cutting lanes and going like 90 miles an hour. 2 cars in front of me, he cuts off a Dodge Charger, and it flicks on its undercover lights. It made my day since Atlanta traffic was terrible and everyone living in GA knew that. But it was jerks like this that would take your commute time from an hour to 2 hours because they were careless and crashed. Story 20. A guy stole my bike from a rack a couple weeks ago. When people approached him, he took off on foot and got hit by a car, making it much easier for the police to find and arrest him. That poor woman that hit him was distraught and convinced she killed him, but he ended up with just some scrapes and bruises. I hope that lady thinks of herself more of a hero than a killer now. Story 21. I just passed my driving test in the UK and got a car. Knew the road has speed cameras on, so was being very careful, and this van behind me was tailing me. He was obviously annoyed at me observing the speed limit, overtook and got flashed by the speed camera just ahead. Story 22. In the 90s, I bought a newspaper every day from a newspaper box. You stick 35 cents into coin slot to unlock. One day I took 2 papers. As I walked away with both papers, my shirt tail got stuck in the door of the newspaper box. Had to pay 35 cents to get my shirt back out. Still so weird to me that newspaper boxes were so popular and often used back then. Story 23. Playing tug of war with a girlfriend's dog. Win the rope. Throw it across the room except my arm is terrible and I take out a framed picture of her and said dog. Grab my glass of wine to take a drink. Dog saunters back over with the rope, puts his snout under my arm to get attention, flips his head back, thus throwing my wine holding hand into the air. Full glass of wine showers all over me. Too long didn't read. Dog upset about broken picture, whines. Amazing pun and amazing dog. Story 24. In 6th grade, we had a substitute teacher who might have been insane. She would show up and start yelling about the most random things. Most people were too afraid to talk to her when she was in class. One day, she was subbing for another class and stopped me on my way to the office. She told me how terrible my class was and how bad of a person and student I am. I was a quiet, straight-A kid. I kept walking and she followed. She stared at me while talking and walked into a large metal pole. I just kept walking when she fell to the ground. Story 25. Back in college, I was crossing the street when this butthole on a motorcycle decided pedestrians shouldn't be allowed to cross in the crosswalk, blew the red light, and nearly ran me down. I stood there for a second, annoyed but thought nothing I can do about it, when another motorcycle came past me. This time it was a police officer. He looked at me, grinned broadly, and then gave me a thumbs up, and then pulled over the guy and gave him a ticket. Imagine the joy that cop felt when he gestured, "Watch this." Story 26. My SO sent me that video of the girl who was trying to make a curling iron tutorial for YouTube and accidentally burned her hair off. SO made fun of her pretty relentlessly. She was in the UK at the time visiting her grandma, had a cheap plug adapter which apparently didn't account for the voltage difference, and burned her own hair off with a curling iron the next day. Too bad hers wasn't uploaded to YouTube too. We need a sequel. Story 27. I was on the beach with my family. My young brother fell in the water and got a face full of sand. I was laughing my butt off when a huge wave came behind me, hit me hard, and I got a mouthful of salt water. My dad laughed his butt off. Story 28. Bohol at work was spending all day freaking around on his new phone. This was when iPhones were new, and showing it off before dropping it onto the grill. Grilled apples aren't too bad. You can make a pie. Story 29. A woman was 70 cents short on her purchase, so I let it go. When counting change, I noticed a 1960s silver dime. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe for more videos to come, or else this spider will be in your bed tonight.